Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Leafs, the Toronto Maple Leafs were back on the ice after a few days off as they prepare for a rematch against the Edmonton Oilers, which we will preview here on today's show. This is the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti from Sportsnet. Mike is away on vacation, and I decided once again to bring a good buddy of mine to join me again on the program. It is my Frank Stanisci, the host of Canada Frank Live, which you can catch up on his YouTube channel and on the Spanglish Sports Network. And just to remind everybody that Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast from. And you can now catch us up on video on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. It's your team every day. Frank, thank you for bringing me back, for coming back. I guess I didn't scare you away from the.
No, you didn't scare me away at all, and it was nice to be appreciated by at least one of your viewers. So
Yeah, I like this guy. I hope you bring him back again. I'm like, well, I guess
you got your wish.
Hey, Frank, what are you doing today? I'm free. I'm good. Okay, beautiful.
Absolutely.
So, so the Leafs are finally back on the ice. We have they've been off the last few days. They came back from the road trip. The team been away. They haven't really been at home ever since. Oh my goodness, since they went out to Seattle before the trade deadline. And now a bunch of new Leafs got to see what it's like to be a Toronto Maple Leaf in Toronto for the day. Sam Lafferty, Jake McCabe. Luke Schenn is not there. Luke Schenn is still away from the team. He is in Vancouver. He is waiting for his wife to give birth to their third child. So obviously it's tough to predict when that will happen. We can't exactly, give a firm timeline on it. So I expect that maybe Luke Schenn will be there at least for the next few days. He might miss he'll miss the game against the Oilers. We'll see against the Sabres on Monday. I'm going to lean towards him not being back in time for that just because he probably need a few days once the baby is born to be there. So probably a little later in the week before we have Luke Schenn back. But the Leafs did make sure to prepare themselves in any situation where a defenseman is available when they made all those trades. And so the lines at practice, that was the first thing I think a lot of people were waiting for. What were these lines going to look like at practice? Mainly because John Tavares was out in the last game against the Devils. Was he going to be back on the ice? How were some of the lines going to switch if Tavares was back? And we finally got our answer. I'm going to just pull up the tweet here from Mark Masters of the lines at practice. And I'm going to preface this by saying these were the lines at practice. I will go over the lines for the game because it's going to be a little bit different, because when people saw the lines at practice, they were a little taken back a little bit here. So the top line remained intact of Kerfoot, Matthews, and Marner. Nylander, Lafferty, and Yarncroke were together. Now, that was listed as a second line. Personally, I think that's more of a third line when you look at the fact that Tavares and Bunting were together. Wayne Simmons back at Leafs practice. That was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people. Just the fact that Wayne Simmons has not been with the team. He was sent down to the Marlies. He has now been recalled. He is with the team and he's practicing with them. The fourth line of Zach Aston-Reese, David Camp, and Noel Acciari remains intact, and Alex Steeves was the extra forward. So people were thinking here and saying, "Oh, is Wayne Simmons getting back into the lineup?" As you'll know, if you've read ahead and if you've seen ahead, that's not exactly the case. But the other thing that a lot of people were looking at was the fact that the defensive pairings looked a little different at practice. Well, McCabe, Brody remained together. Morgan Rielly was with Eric Gustafsson, who hasn't played a whole lot. He's been at like the seventh defenseman. So he was with Morgan Rielly, and then Mark Giordano and Timothy Liljegren remained together. Then it was weird that people didn't see Justin Hall with the regulars. He was skating on a pairing with Connor Timmins, which would usually suggest that Justin Hall wouldn't be playing on Saturday against Edmonton. So that was kind of everybody's belief. And then, as I've come to tell people, sometimes what they tweet out at practice doesn't always mean it's going to be that case, because, you're not going to go through practice. Sometimes there's placeholders for players who are injured, who aren't coming back. In this case, everybody that's kind of here is most likely playing. Um, but when you see these lines, Frank, were you thinking that like what's Sheldon Keefe doing here? Why was Justin Hall being scratched? Even though I think a lot of Leaf fans,
It's continuity for sure. That's not as while we might be surprised in a way, we're not shocked. You know what I mean? Hall has always been, as long as he's been with the team, never 100%er. There's always that time when he's either it's not been as bad this year as it has been in the past, where he's gone all the way to the press box.
yeah,
And now in this case, I think he'll play. But then again, who knows? I know that Gustafson needs to get a little work on the team. He had that really slow start, that puck that went by him. So, he needs some confidence to be built. I find the combination of him and Riley interesting.
yeah. So as Sheldon Keefe mentioned after practice, so Justin Hall does remain in the lineup. It's just he is not going to be on a regular pairing. And I'm going to bring up the lines here. I'm going to use our fancy graphic that we don't tend to get to use all the time, but we're gonna start be using it more now when we see all these changes to lineup. So as we know, Tavares and Bunting will have a rotating player. I put rotating player because I
Right.
can't just put an empty spot there. It looks a little weird. So rotating player on their right side. My early guess would be William Nylander and Mitch Marner might take some turns there. Maybe you'll see Kelly Yarncroke get some time there. But on defense, Morgan Riley will play with Justin Hall and Eric Gustin. They are going to go with 7 defensemen. It's not the first time, and I suspect it won't be the last time we see this. Sheldon Keefe says he wants to keep guys in the lineup. He just doesn't want to be sitting guys because of a numbers situation. He doesn't want to say, "Oh, we're taking a guy out because we need to play only 6 defensemen." What do you think about that idea, though, that having 7 defensemen just to keep guys in the lineup?
I think it does create a kind of minor confusion, because you're not going out with the same guy. Even when you have the situation where who's going over the boards. There's even that, right? There's nothing that makes it easier when you're just throwing 4 lines out there and 3 defense pairs. Everybody knows who they're with if the game goes the way it's planned, and that doesn't necessarily mean if you're winning or not. It just means, is the team playing to the potential the coach expects with the way the lineup is playing, as a group and individually per lines and as players. So no, I'm not a big fan of this. To answer your question, I understand why they're doing it. It almost speaks to in my mind, a little bit. It might say a little bit of lack of confidence in the defenders on one hand. On the other hand, he's got players in his lineup. He wants to see how they handle a little extra shift here and there. And we know with Marner, you're right. I agree with you, who could be playing in that extra spot, but it also will depend on power play and penalty killing time, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I understand why Sheldon Keefe is doing it. I've never really been a fan of it, just because he even admits it's more work for the coaching staff to get all that to deal with all the incorporating all the players in the lineup. Not having that extra forward, that 12th forward, puts a little more strain. We saw what happened when they went with 11-7 in Vancouver, and then they lose Ryan O'Reilly, and then that changes the whole dynamic of the you know of the lineup, because they now only have 10 forwards. Austin Matthews missed a little bit of time that game. Like, it puts a strain on the other forwards when you because that's something that I think coaches sometimes have to think about. Obviously, there are teams that do it. At Tampa, at one point, I believe last year, we're doing 11-7 quite often, just because they want to get guys in. So maybe Sheldon Keefe was learning a little bit from that. I'm not sure, but it's definitely interesting that they're going to continue to do this. I would assume that once they've established some sort of rhythm, whether that's Shen returning and him solidifying his spot in the lineup. I don't think you're going to be seeing this happen as much later in the month of April. I guess for now they're okay with it, but I think once guys are healthy and they've established kind of more concrete lineups, because look, in the playoffs, you want to give whatever lineup for the playoffs some run. You're not going to want to run those for 2 games and be like, all right, this is our lineup. I think Sheldon Keefe is going to want to establish that a lot earlier.
David, haven't we noticed with Sheldon Keefe, he likes to make the players accountable. And he sets, I won't call them traps, but he does set situations where they have to play for their ice time. And this might speak to also that he might not have as much confidence in both the defense and the offense. He's trying to figure out what defensemen he's going to use. And as far as the offense is concerned, he's benching a guy because he could put an extra guy in there. He's not in there. That's one less position available to the players that we both know and every fan knows. There are guys that are in ink on the lineup, and then there are guys that are in pencil.
No, exactly. Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. Of course, the big task at hand will be stopping Mr. Connor McDavid, who will be playing, looking for a similar result from the last time he played against Toronto. So we'll preview the game. We'll go through that matchup and more. But before we do, let me talk to you guys about today's show sponsor, and that is the FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season and the NHL season is here. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line to point scorers, threes drained in basketball, how many shot a player gets in the game, how many saves a goalie makes, who will score the first goal. Or if you want to get a little bit brave, try to predict the exact score of a hockey game. Try it. It's very hard to do, but the payout is very, very sweet if you do end up doing that. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment with FanDuel more with and they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's your team every day, and of course, I'm joined by my good friend Frank Stanisci, who is filling in with Mike out of town. Frank, we might have to get you a more permanent spot here. You're here 2 days in a row.
I appreciate that.
Coming on, and also coming on when this is a busy time for the Leafs. They are there's a lot going on, and they obviously have something very, very pressing at hand, and that is Connor McDavid, who the last time played against the Leafs, he let them know who was the best player in the NHL.
Is there any question? Is there a question? Was that a question? I mean,
I know that last year a lot of people were saying Austin Matthews was getting a little bit of credit in terms of one of the top players in the NHL. But I think this season there is no doubt who is the best player in the league, and that is Connor McDavid. I was actually I'm looking it up right now. I've always meant to look up what the awards look like in terms of betting. So if you think you can make money on Connor McDavid winning the Hart Trophy, guess again, that ain't happening. He is a minus 4,000 favorite. Minus 4,000 favorite to win the Hart Trophy, which in betting terms means don't even try to bet on
don't bet the house. Don't bet the house.
You'll win, but you're not going to make money off of that. So I found that to be a very interesting one. We also know Austin Matthews winning it last year. That one seemed to be it was a no-brainer, but it wasn't as clear-cut as Connor McDavid this season.
If he doesn't get it, what do you think the bet's worth? Let's say if I said Marner gets it.
Mitch Marner, that's a good question. Mitch Marner is a plus 20,000.
Yikes.
So just to give you a fraction, because I know some people want to know what does that actually mean. Mitch Marner is a 200 to 1 odd to win the Hart Trophy. That's like out of the difference here. Like David Pastrnak is a 31-1. Jack Hughes is a 48-1. So if you're thinking, maybe something happens and we might not want to lock in on Connor McDavid, that's a tough one, guys. Like Jason Robertson,
Oh,
40-1. I mean, again, you're
who's
throwing.
who's the next guy? Is it Pasternak?
Yeah, Pastrnak is a 31-1 odds. So that's
So
like
if you bet now and you put a buck on Pasternak, how much do you get back?
if okay,
About.
I'll tell you right now. If you put $1 on Pastrnak, you win $31.
So if you put $10 down, you get $310.
Correct.
And all you need to happen there is, and I'm not wishing this, and I'm knocking wood that it doesn't happen, that Connor McDavid has a season-ending injury.
Well, funny enough, looked like he had a pretty tough injury against the Boston Bruins. He collided, I think it was Derek Ryan. Derek Ryan did not see Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid did not see Derek Ryan. They collided. Connor McDavid was holding his leg area, which we all know not something you want to see. And I think a lot of Edmonton Oilers fans had a bit of they needed a heart doctor or cardiologist near them because oof, that looked very painful. Obviously, he was fine. He finished out the game, but funny enough, he did not register a single point against the Boston Bruins. The Edmonton Oilers did win that game. I found that like that's not a common thing where the Oilers can win a game without Connor McDavid scoring. That's why Connor McDavid is the runaway MVP because he has been scoring at will pretty much all the time. Not always winning. The Oilers haven't always been winning when McDavid's scoring, but when he's not scoring, it's tough for them to win. So that was an impressive win against the Bruins. I know a lot of Leafs fans want to see the team get some revenge. When you look at the fact that the Bruins find a way to hold McDavid off the score sheet, yet still lose, and this is a very rare thing for the Bruins to lose at home, what does that tell you just about the difference of this Oilers team maybe in the last week, I would say, since the trade deadline when they get Matthias Ekholm. Evander Kane is back in the lineup. He seems to be getting over his injury issues. This is not an easy task for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They just went through the New Jersey Devils, who are a good team. They found a way to beat them with a lineup that was missing some key players. Now you got Connor McDavid, the high-flying Oilers. This is not an easy task for Toronto.
No, while the Oilers, they'll have played this. The Leaf game will be their second game, but it won't be back to back for them. They'll have a couple of days off before they meet the Leafs, so that fatigue shouldn't be a problem. But I think fatigue was a problem for the Leafs, against them. And they also had a little bit of a social event, if I remember correctly, the night before to see Bruce Springsteen. And they with all the changes that they had and that kind of stuff, I think that has a lot to do with it. Do they have a chance? Well, they're sitting at home in Toronto. They're not going to have their home goaltender, and Murray's going to be in instead. Murray has been effective. Really, the only problem with Murray has been him getting injured. So he's really the difference. He's going to make a difference. He's the guy that's going to help keep Edmonton off the score sheet. And then Toronto's offense and defense needs to get in on Edmonton early. And I think they need a lead in the game just to get their confidence against Edmonton. We saw what Edmonton did to Boston, a pretty good team. The energy level in that game for both teams was incredible. It was an amazing energy level for both teams. They were both up for that game, and we know why. I mean, they know in the back of their heads that this could be a Stanley Cup final matchup.
It could be. I think a lot of Canadian hockey fans would like to see that. At least it would guarantee a Canadian championship, a Canadian team winning a Stanley Cup. So I don't think the American networks would like that all too much, although there'd be enough storylines to keep them entertained. But I think up here north of the border, many would like that. Just to give you a thought, you brought up Matt Murray. He actually has a pretty decent record against the Edmonton Oilers in his career. He is 7-2-1, has a 914 save percentage, and a 2.96 goals against average in 12 games against Edmonton. So this is a team that, he hasn't played against a lot, but he hasn't. It's not like a team that he struggles to play against. So that's a very interesting stat line there. We know Sheldon Keefe has been wanting to get both goaltenders going. This isn't a surprise. Matt Murray was being announced as the starter. Sheldon Keefe made that very clear a few days ago. Now, Mike and I like to always say we'll believe it when we see it because Matt Murray has a tendency to not make it through warm up. First, you have to make sure he gets through morning skate. Then you got to make sure he gets through warm up now. So those are kind of the two check marks we have to give Matt Murray before we can fully say he is going to start this game.
So don't be bet on who's in goal until you hear the national anthem.
Yeah, exactly. If you're Matt Murray save total until around the national anthem, that'll at least get you in before puck drop. But yeah, that's one thing. That's definitely a very good point there. So Connor McDavid, he's the task. He's the guy that is going to get the most attention. Obviously, you can't put your your sole focus on him. They still got a lot of other players that can produce. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins had a 4-point performance. I believe it was against the Winnipeg Jets. He's got his scoring going. Leon Draisaitl, we know he's what he's all about. Evander Kane, Zach Hyman. There are guys that can produce on this Oilers team. But I think when you're looking at Connor McDavid, for me, the matchup is make Connor McDavid spend as much time skating the full length of the rink and don't shorten the ice for him, meaning don't turn the puck over and let him transition with speed because then you're asking for trouble.
I think don't let him transition because he has the speed. It's not. You're 100% right, and they do have to be very careful with him. Obviously, we saw what happened, and you brought up the fact that he didn't score, and they still beat Boston, and they do have guys like Kane that have had good careers against the Maple Leafs, and he has a style that could be a problem for the Leafs if their defense. One of the reasons why the Leafs defense looks different today than it did before the trade deadline is because of players like Kane. Guys that need to be boxed out, and the Leafs had trouble doing that stuff in close. So that'll be a good test for their new lineup in defense.
It will be. It definitely will be. And I think the difference here with them being at home, they can match up the Connor McDavid line against likely Jake McCabe and Justin Hall. Those were that's the shutdown pair. That's the pair they're going to expect to play against top competition. Let's just hope Morgan Rielly doesn't spend a lot of time against Connor McDavid. The last time McDavid was in Toronto with a crowd, I will say. He has come to Toronto, obviously, the bubble and all those things. The last time he played in Toronto with a crowd in the stands was back in 2020, January, and he put Morgan Rielly on the
Yeah,
high
he did.
for the rest of his career with an amazing goal. So hopefully Morgan Rielly has gone over that in some regard.
He was looking for his jockstrap after
Yeah.
the goal.
Yeah, that was well up in the rafters of Scotiabank.
Wow.
He ain't
Oh.
again.
Yeah,
So
well, that's the thing about McDavid. The man has so much talent. He's so quick with his feet. He's so quick with his hands, and he's so quick with his shot. You really do have to pay attention to him, and you do almost have to. And it is what it is, and it plays to his strengths a little bit too. But it's all you can do. You gotta defend him in layers. You just can't. It's got to be almost in waves because if two guys go after him, he'll figure his way around two guys.
he definitely will. That is something that Connor McDavid is not shy about. He will take any challenge that a team will throw up against him and say, "Yeah, I can." That shouldn't be a problem. The Leafs. So just to give you any of those who are looking for betting lines on this game, the Toronto Maple Leafs are. I'm just looking up here. Sorry, I got to look up. Change this. I'm on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, so I'm just trying to find the. Yeah, I should have had this queued up a little bit more. The Leafs are. I don't think they're favored actually in this game.
I wouldn't think they are either.
The Oilers are slight favorites in this game. So if you are very confident that the Toronto Maple Leafs can win this game, actually, sorry, no, I'm wrong. The Leafs are favored in this game
because of the home team status.
Yeah, so they are favored in this game. That is my fault, everybody. But that's why you
That's
have
important.
to verify everything. So the Toronto Maple Leafs are the favorites in this game. Whether I would place a bet on them, That's a tough one. I don't know if I would say that they're an overwhelming favorite. They're only a -30 to which that's obviously enough to give them the favorite title here, but it's not juicy enough for me to put a bet on them to win the game. Now, there are a couple of other things you can look at here. We know that there was a lot of goals in this game, in the last game, so the over under is 6.5. So you could look at doing the over.
4-3.
Yeah, so you can look at doing the over here. If you think this is going to be a close game, you can pick the Oilers to cover the spread, which is 1.5 goals. So if you think this is going to be a close game, you can look at that as well as a potential prop to bet on there. So it'll be a very interesting matchup. We know the Leafs are going to want that game left a bad taste out of their mouth. A lot of it was self-inflicted. Goaltending wasn't the best either in that game. So let's see if it's a better recipe this time. Now we'll set aside that matchup. Now we're gonna kind of put a bow on today's show. And we're gonna discuss actually some news that came out off the ice regarding Mitch Marner and some closure that he is getting. I'll let you know what I mean by that on the other side. This is the Locked On Leafs podcast on Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast, everybody. David Morassutti here with my good friend Frank Stanisci. So it was just out of nowhere. The Toronto Police Department, Toronto Police sent out a memo, a news release saying that they arrested 2 suspects in a pair of cases of carjacking. And everybody saw one of the dates, which was May 16, 2022. And obviously the lines were clicking together, and a few news reporters put out saying that was one of the dates that Mitch Marner had his car stolen last year. Him and his fiance were out and about in the Etobicoke area, and they had their Range Rover stolen at gunpoint. Mitch Marner, at the time, we didn't know about this right away, but we found out about it, and Mitch Marner kind of came out and said this was a situation that affected him mentally, just because it was a very scary situation, right? Funny enough, the car was recovered, and 2 people were arrested. There is a third person that was involved that they're still looking for, but Mitch Marner made it known that you know what, it was a scary experience, but it's nice to have closure. I would think that something like this, even though it happened almost a year ago, would still weigh on somebody. An experience like that doesn't just go away, quickly either.
No, not at all. I remember when it happened, and it raised, the positive thing that happened from it is that a lot of people were informed, and he helped inform people on what it takes to defend yourself from being hijacked like that. One of the things that he did that he knows now wasn't something they should have done. And my advice to folks is don't park too far away from the rest of the cars. I know you want to protect your vehicle, but I think you should protect yourself over and above that. So there were some lessons learned. There was an opportunity for the police to educate folks. So there's always a positive side, and that was the positive side here. And now what we've got is complete positive, experience for Mitch Marner. He gets to know that the criminals are put away and his vehicle is back. And whenever something gets stolen, this is really terrible. It's one thing to have somebody take something from you and you're not around. It's another thing to take it right from you. So I respect the pain and the emotional thing that happened to Mitch, and I'm glad he handled it okay and he feels better, and anything to help him feel emotionally whole, because there is kind of a loss there, and it's something hard to deal with. So I hope he gets as close to 100%. And let's not forget his girlfriend, who was there too.
Yeah, and funny enough, when this situation, the same people were involved in a pair of robberies in the same area. So
Wow.
I know that this robbery, the carjacking, actually raised an awareness in that area. It was the Queensway. If you're from me, I'm from Etobicoke. It's actually about 10-15 minutes from where I live. It was actually at the movie theater, the Cineplex movie theater, that it happened. I was a little surprised in a very public setting that this has happened, but we're seeing
During daylight hours,
yeah,
if I remember right?
I think this one was at night,
Okay.
but we're seeing in Toronto that there's daylight carjackings happening too. And funny enough, it was also noted that his vehicle was recovered. I found that to be quite curious. You would think that in a lot of these carjackings, they want to get rid of these cars as soon as possible, so that like the whole point is that you get these cars shipped away as far. And in a lot of these carjacking situations, I wonder if two things. One, was it because it was Mitch Marner's car? Would some people, if they were trying to sell it, if somebody would have a little bit of suspicion about it because, it's a very well known person. We knew it was a Range Rover. Um, and two, what happens with the car now? Obviously, it probably gets released back to Mitch. And what does he do with it, with another Range Rover now?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting situation. I guess it belongs to the insurance company.
Yeah, that's because he would have had made whole by the insurance company when the initial carjacking happened. So I wonder if the insurance company takes it and they do what they need to recoup whatever money they had to spend to get a Marner new car. That's a very interesting. I've never experienced something like that. And actually, somebody messaged me and saying it took this long for them to get this. I'm like, I'm a little surprised it took this long just because the car was still there. Like nobody would have found this car, but like even a few months after the fact, it was very interesting. But
Well,
hopefully
we
now,
learn a lot. We learn in a lot of TV shows, David. They wait for things to cool down, but the problem is, to what you said, it wasn't just a car. It was a car to for one of the most famous people in Toronto in the community.
yeah. So it's a very interesting situation there. So we're glad that Mitch Marner can now put this chapter fully behind him. The people that did this are have been arrested. Now they can the justice system will take care of the rest there. I think both people were actually in court, as the document said. So Mitch Marner gets the chance to put that behind him. Final thing for me here, Frank. Prediction for the game on Saturday. I'm not usually one for predictions, but I thought maybe you might have a prediction for how this game against the Oilers go.
4-3 Leafs.
4-3 Leafs. I like that score, actually. It's not a. I don't think this is going to be a low scoring game. It is hockey night in Canada. Maybe because the pressure, I think it'll be a little slow out of the gate potentially. But yeah, I do think that the over will be hit, and I do think a 4-3 score is not a bad one. It's not a bad prediction here. So,
We'll see how good it is.
well, yeah. Hopefully we get a very entertaining game and a very. Let's just hope with the emotion that both teams play with in the last game, we see that in this game. I don't think that'll be too much of a problem, but obviously a lot of people will be keeping their eyes on the lineup, how the 11-7 play again, and all those things. So we'll obviously be looking and keeping an eye on that. And on the next episode, which will come out on Monday, I'll break down the game. I will have another guest with me. I don't know who it is just yet. I have a couple people I've reached out to. It could be Frank again. We'll see. Frank, I'm gonna have to pay you double time now because I'm bringing you. You're gonna have to have a good agent to
We'll
negotiate.
discuss that later.
Okay. Well, thank you, Frank, for joining me again. That will do it for us today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasting platforms to make sure you receive daily Leafs content Monday to Friday. We're putting out 5 shows a week. So also make sure you are subscribed on YouTube because you can watch us on video form there. Locked On Leafs. Follow myself on Twitter at @D_Morassutti and follow Frank on Twitter at CandidFrank Live and follow the show at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode, as I said, on Monday. We'll break down the game against the Oilers and we'll preview Monday's game against the Buffalo Sabres, which I will be in attendance for. I'll have a little more of those details on Monday's episode. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.